Welcome to another episode of Women Lifting Women, a podcast dedicated to female voices and leadership in tech. My name is Emma Raz, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm joined today by Mary. Mary, please introduce yourself for our listeners.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Keane-Dawson. I have built and sold 3 companies in the advertising sector, built 2 more that didn't manage to get away to a sale, but great experiences nonetheless. I've been a main board director of Ogilvy and Mather, and I've raised probably about $100 million during my 38-year career in the advertising, marketing, and ad tech industry. So I'm a veteran. I'm also the chairman of BIMA, the British Interactive Media Association. I sit on the advisory board of the Internet Commission, and I am also the executive chair of Machine Capital, which is an investment fund that specializes in new technologies. So, hello.
Oh, that is one hell of a resume, have to say, and all of it is extremely impressive. And we'll start off by thinking, so you've done a lot, you achieved a lot. What do you think has been your superpower in doing all of these things? What is the advantage that you had, do you think, over your counterparts that helps you drive you to be so successful?
Well, I mean, it's a long career, and when I first got into advertising and media back in the day, people who had ambition, tenacity, and creativity were very highly valued, and where the industry, most of my employers in the early days in particular, invested in me, so training, coaching, lots of self-awareness raising, and I became a leader very early in my career. I was my first managing director's role when I was 28, and I think that having that self-awareness, and also if it's hard to discuss these things, but the feedback I've had from other people who I've known a long time or who know me in the industry is that I was always seen as courageous, and I've been blessed with a very curious way of perceiving the world. I'm always interested in what's the next thing, how's that going to affect the consumer, how that's going to affect our industry. And so that's really been the red thread that has gone through my career. So I think being curious, being competitive, and also being brave have been the 3 sort of pillars of my career to date. Sometimes I've been a bit stupid as well, but I'm sure we'll cover that too.
I mean, we all have to be a bit stupid sometimes. That's also what teaches us and makes, we have to, I think, in order to see or learn something. We have to fail, we have to make mistakes.
Yes, but I think as the industry has evolved, and particularly now the ecosystem, which is so, from a commercial perspective, very, very heavily, dependent on ad and martech as the way forward, and obviously now with the rise of AI in pretty much every single thing that we do, I think that the character of the industry has changed quite dramatically, and there is I think a tendency for this concentration of power within you could say a handful of companies and businesses globally. I think it actually oppresses and suppresses a lot of genuine innovation and creative thinking, because the barriers to entry are so enormous and so high.
I mean, I work in a startup that is doing exactly that. We are in the field of AI, behavioral intelligence, and we are that's the company we're building. And so I completely understand. I completely understand, because I live it. I've been living it for the last couple of years, and of how do you build a company from scratch is a startup in this environment is not simple, especially when you're competing against some really heavyweight fighters out there that is really concentrating. And this industry did consolidate a lot in the past few years.
It's a cycle of consolidation that has gone on for the last 40 years, but I think the speed at which it is now happening, there's a consolidation piece, but there is also, I think it's fair to say, it's much harder to achieve cut through now than it was 5-10 years ago. And the reason for that is that the opcos have gotten into the tech business, and that in so doing have invested in acquiring technologies that they then choose to put forward to the clients. So the choice is not there that in my opinion, that there once was. So, you know, you're in a market where being well funded and having a really clear and understandable roadmap to achieve what you need to achieve, with, you know, where you can show that you've got traction and you're actually able to move the needle, is absolutely vital to success.
That I can talk to you about forever. That I will go back to the subject of the podcast, and maybe this is a conversation for another time. I will buy you a drink or coffee or something, and we can chat about it for a long time. I would love your input.
I'd love to do that. Let's have a coffee.
Absolutely. But I will ask about a challenge and how, because I think the challenge really teaches us how to become better, stronger people. What do you feel has been a major challenge in your career, and how did you manage to go beyond that?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest challenges I had in my career was being a mother, and having to deal with the prejudice of many of the men that I worked with around the fact that I had a kid and I had children, and that, you know, I didn't see that as actually a reason why I could not do a better job than them or be their bosses. And I think that, you know, we have had a lot of stories about the Me Too movement in the community of advertising, alongside, you know, examples of prejudice in both advertising and in the way the companies operate toward people from different backgrounds, low income, and or, you know, ethnicity, you know, sexuality, gender, and what have you. You know, I think that that has been one of the biggest challenges, because I don't know if you've ever heard of the expression the glass cliff. You know, I became a woman who had a lot of success early on in her career, had managed to buy a company and sell it to WPP, and went to work for WPP for 4 years in America. And then I had a baby, and you know, and the experience I had was really, really tough. It was not fair, and it was completely unreasonable. But the conspiracy of, you know, silence around, like, women in senior leadership roles with kids, we had to play the game. And you had to pretend like, you know, you didn't have any responsibilities outside of your job. And I think that probably now, looking back on it, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do so, that, you know, I made a lot of sacrifices for my, you know, from my job as well as for my family. And I don't want that to be the case for women going forward. Too many women make a decision in our industry to have, when they've had their children, is that I'm happy to get to this level, but I'm not going to go to C-suite, because I do not want the stress. I do not want the demands. I do not want to have all of the pressure, that because I can't have the work-life balance that I actually need for my kids and for my family and for the things that are important to me outside of work. So I think that this generation of your generation and the people who will be your successors, I really hope that we can have these conversations openly and not continue to perpetuate these, you know, beliefs that women can't talk about football, women aren't able to have coherent conversations about economics or neuroscience or whatever, because basically we're there to look after the company and look after everybody in the company in this sort of mothering role. The actual reality is that, as somebody who, you know, has always been very competitive, I played hockey as a child, and I'm the eldest of my siblings. You know, when you've got people around you who are fighting with you over the salt cellar, you soon learn how to, you know, or the hockey stick and the hockey ball on the pitch. So I think I was really lucky that I had those experiences, which I brought into business with me. But the other thing was, I had grandparents who told me, you are brilliant, you are special, you are really, really going to be successful, and you should do whatever you want to do to make yourself so. And I think that self-belief and those messages, I'm the child of immigrants, I believed that my parents and my grandparents would, you know, were right, because that's what they told me. And I think that I have defended myself in terms of some of the pretty toxic environments I've had to work in, where people become very jealous or angry with you because you're popular or you're successful. I was in a big high profile job a few years ago where we quadrupled the revenue of this business, and I became the most hated woman in the organization at large. Because why, how the hell is she doing that? How is she in her team? Because it was my team that were doing it, by the way, not me. I was leading it, but I was definitely part of a very, very good team, exceptional people. And that sort of that kind of cannibalization within the industry, the politics of the industry and the toxicity of the industry, you scratch the surface and it's still there. And I think that leaders, of our industry have to address this, because we are basically creating, a situation where we're playing like Caesars in Rome while it's burning.
I mean, I will actually then switch to a question. I will switch the order. That's all right. We don't need to follow orders anyway. What do you think is the role of men in promoting better representation, especially in leadership? As like, yes, leaders in general have a responsibility, but majority of leadership is still run by men. Fortunately, like it is what it is.
Do the right thing. Get out of the way. Is what I tell men.
That's a very good statement.
Do the right thing. Like you're surrounded by these hugely capable, smart, really talented women. Partner with us, collaborate with us, give us the opportunity to improve the situation, whether that's commercial, cultural, technological products, consumer experience, whatever it is, right? Don't just want me to tell you the good news all the time.
Yeah.
How many women do we know that have, and I'm sure you know them, I definitely do, especially this last few months, or this last 12 months really, where there's been a lot of culling in the industry. There's a lot of cutbacks, people being made redundant, entire layers of management being ripped out. I know for a fact that a lot of the women who have been made redundant, there's a belief system within their organizations that, well, they'll be all right because they've got husbands or they've got boyfriends or whatever. There's men here working in this organization who they're the main breadwinner in their families, so we have to take good care of them. These are actual systematic prejudices and assumptions that are being made in the I was always the breadwinner in my family.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
my mom as well, and so I'm like, my partner is a film director, so you know how it is within film.
Yeah,
It's ups and downs, it changes all the time. So I'm
try being married to a chef.
I mean, so like it kind of changes.
It is. I don't want to. I love men, right? I've been married 3 times, so I'm pretty much got,
you believe in them.
But I mean, the reality is that because you were born a bloke does not make you better than me, because I was born a woman, or for that matter, if you change your gender, I mean, that doesn't give you some sort of superiority over anybody. And I think that we have still, especially in advertising technology, there is a dominance of white middle class men.
I agree.
And the benefits they've had through education, through networking, through their experiences of life. I mean, I don't want to take anything away or detract from them, but I'm telling you now that having women on your team will make you a much better boss and a much better company.
But the fact that we communicate different, like the thing is, the workplace has been designed for men. A lot of it has been designed for men, whether we normalize male communication style, and we normalized a lot of so I had to adopt a lot of male mannerism early on in my career. It comes from cybersecurity, so it's very dominant, very heavily male. And I had to, and some of it became my own, and I'm all right with it. But I know that, for example, if someone from my team cries, I don't just make a big fuss of it, because there's somewhat, it's okay. It's not a really big deal. I don't need one response not better than another, and it's not unprofessional or something some emotion is not unprofessional, or different release of emotion is not unprofessional, and one release is not more professional than another. A lot of things what I've seen is this normalization of male reactions above female reactions, which we then say this is normal or this is fine and this is not fine.
Yeah, I mean,
Makes
it's
it
too many,
harder for women.
yeah, I mean, there's too many examples, and I hear about them quite frequently because I'm I coach senior people, and alongside my consulting, and I mean, you know, I hear horror stories of ad tech founders screaming and shouting and, you know, swearing and basically bullying their teams, right? Because they are frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it does. If you are frustrated, go and count to 10 and go for a walk around the block.
Yeah,
Do
get a
not
dog.
take do not you know, do not take your frustrations out on your fellow colleagues, the people that you employ, and because that is just the behavior of a narcissist, and also that you are no better than anybody else in that office.
Mm-hmm.
You happen to be the founder of the company. Behave with respect and behave with decorum and treat your people well. But do not take out your foot. Now, there's a lot of anger in our industry because people do get very frustrated, and it is tough. There's no question about that. But we cannot keep on celebrating, you know, this male behaviors. I mean, I was told very early in my career, God, Mary, you know, you've got bigger balls than any other bloke I've ever worked with. And that was supposed to be a compliment.
I was the same.
Yeah, you know.
And you felt like you had to a degree, or like whatever that means.
Well, there was a lot of pressure to be conform, as you say, but when it came down to, you know, the decisions about, you have to look after yourself. Okay, that is the one thing that you learn in leadership, right? That, you know, nobody is going to look after you. Okay, once you, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of women don't go into the very top jobs, because they know that they'll get resented. They know people will talk about how much money they earn. They, you know, how she, you know, I remember I had people, you know, who worked for me in one company who said, there's a shop down the road, you know, that really reminds us of you. It was in Marylebone. And I was like, oh, what, really? Yes, it's called Rich Bitch. And I thought to myself, and that really hurt me. You have no idea. It was like someone had actually stuck a stiletto blade in my side. And I was like, why do these people hate me? I don't really hate you because they're resentful. They're angry at the fact that, you know, you're the only girl in the gang, you know. And then if you land up being the CEO of a large corporation, a lot of people will, you know, develop narrative around the fact that, you know, you're a middle-aged woman, you know, why are you in that job? Do you know what I mean? And it can be very, there is still a lot of feminist and anti-female belief around, and it's hard, you know. And I do feel that younger women, I mean, you know, like when I was a younger woman and I got to where I did get to at the very young age that I was, it's because it was about being capable. It was about delivery. It was about being a good boss, being a good leader. And I think that we've somehow seemed to have lost sight of that, because we're now all about, you know, technological background of MIT and Stanford or wherever it might be, and the fact that you may have worked in a company that was previously, you know, that became a unicorn, so that qualifies you to lead an organization. If we look at someone, you know, it's really a very less human oriented industry than it was when I first got into it in the late 80s. So I would really recommend to all millennials and you know, and Gen Zers, as you build your companies or as you grow your organizations, you know, put human-centric behavior at the core of it.
I mean, I do agree, and I mean, things like from the way that we, I mean, I'm a millennial, I'll admit it, and I I've been raised in this quite aggressive. Also worked. I started my career in Israel, which is more chauvinistic than like it's a country. It's a bit more chauvinistic. It is what it is. It's just part of the culture. You're being talked to in a certain way. You're being like, you play a certain role. I was quite young. I was fresh out of college, cybersecurity. So again, really male, and it was tough. It made me tougher, but it wasn't easy. And I've always experienced to some degree of like was raised in this industry where no matter how capable you are, it's not like it's not about who you are. It's not about that. It's not about your capabilities or necessarily what you're able to do. And it's a lot of games and it's a lot of other things, and you learn to manage. But it's not like.
Do you really?
I don't know. It's not.
I don't know if you do.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to be contentious. I hope you don't mind, but I just think why should we learn to deal with this and suck it up? Right?
You're right.
Why is it okay for these things to happen? Right? Why is it okay for these things to happen in organizations? Just sign an NDA, give them a few £1,000 and they'll go away. Right? That is not the culture of a good organization, which is actually self-reflecting on how they can improve what they're doing and ultimately what they're delivering. Because another thing that happens in and I believe this is actually a problem that is pretty much industry-wide in advertising and ad tech and in MarTech in general, is we are losing sight of our consumers, okay? Yeah. The actual end user that we are, we're selling in effect. Yeah. And the reality is that, the behaviors of our culture and our society need to be, as I said, refocused on a much more human-centric, human-first approach, as we are the guardians of a very fragile, cultural and society, and it's under attack. And you're a cybersecurity expert, so I don't need to tell you that, there's so much fakery and so much misinformation that is going on, and so much spyware that is actually in the internet. And I fear for the industry, because I fear that the consumer is increasingly cynical and skeptical of everything. And that is very bad for advertising, because in advertising, you have to make an emotional connection with the consumer to have any effect.
I completely agree. So worked in before in behavior, like previous job, took a break from ad tech, and I worked for a nonprofit about animal welfare, big passion of mine. I decided to do it for a bit. I did all the research for why people support and everything else. Why people why do you donate? Why do you support? How do you change behaviors and so on? But it taught me a lot, and I bring to my role now, is it's all about emotional connection. We actually make most of our decisions are emotional. Most of our purchasing decisions are emotional. Rationality has no place almost in most of our decisions in life. And it's all about, if you're trying to tell a story, it's about creating an emotional connection with your audience. And you need to think of them first. This is what creating, this is what advertising is all about.
But if you reduce everything down to an impression measure, right, and a demographic, formula, okay, and sprinkle some, proxy networks on top of it, right? Where is the humanity in that? And I think that, we need to recalibrate our thinking around what we are doing and what value we are bringing to human experience, because and I feel as though I was incredibly lucky to be in the industry 30 odd years ago when I first got involved, because advertising was absolutely incredible in those days. We were making emotional connections. We were then evolving that into educating the consumer. And then we brought it, when digital first came along, we were all about empowering people, because, we invented, D2C. We built, the search engines. We, learned how to deliver highly targeted and tailored and bespoke messaging. But that, I fear that so much of that is now being lost in a maelstrom of dehumanization, because we have moved so far away from actually making those emotional connections.
I agree. I mean, obviously, when we work, what we do is exactly on that front of basically is understanding users without privacy violation. But you often think about, because I talk to brands, how do you tell better stories? How do you tell real stories? How do you tell stories that resonate? How do you understand people? And that's why I said I bring a lot of my previous background, actually. Surprisingly, a lot of the nonprofit research I've done into this, because I learned to understand people's motivation and how do you change behavior.
Absolutely.
And that's a big part of creating an effective campaign. So even when I talk, partner said film director, creating commercials, we talk about how do you create an emotional connection with the audience? How do you not just make something pretty, but how do you make something impactful and emotional and real? As you also film documentaries, it's also something that you learn a lot of how do you make a real connection with someone, because you need to tell their stories. So I think that's all have been for me really educational tools on how I also do my job. And it's part of things I do outside of my job. It's really impacted the way I think. So I completely agree. And switching to like the one question, community. What do you think is the role of community in promoting those issues and increasing those awareness, maybe supporting one another?
Well, I mean, community is absolutely essential to us, being human centric, right? And so, we have to support people around us to be able to deliver, success, and we have to be able to, enable there to be an effective means by which we share our knowledge, we share our experiences, and we share our learnings with one another. And I think that, inevitably, as we have moved into this very hybrid work environment, it is much harder for people who are coming into the industry and into the sector to understand and identify with a lot of the things that we've just been discussing during our conversation, because they probably were at university or whatever during the pandemic. They've come out the other end. Society is very, very focused on the TikTokers, the Instagrammers, as we discussed, this sort of fake world that we've created for ourselves. And I think that it's very tough for young people in particular, but for all of us, we have challenges in terms of actually connecting with the community. I think probably one of the reasons why next week we're recording this just prior to the start of Cannes. I think one of the reasons why next week you will see hundreds of thousands of people land up in Cannes, and in a month's time there'll be maybe 20,000 people in London at MadFest over 3 days, right? Is that there is a desperate need. People want to connect. They want to cross-fertilize. They want to have these opportunities to understand what the community stands for and what it means. And I think it's very important that we continue to raise a rallying cry for the benefits of having our industry and having an independent sector and having new tech and innovation coming into it, because it is actually benefiting our end users, which is the consumer. But I think all too often these communities can become cliques. And that's something that I think is really important, that we break down the barriers to that I think are forming continuously throughout the industry.
I mean, I think that I just spoke about it in my last interview, but I mean, there is something about when you create a group, you find something in common, but you also say, oh, we're different than other people outside of that group. And it's part of creating that group identity. And the advantage of it is unifying you. The disadvantage of it is also creating that isolation and belief that you are different.
Yeah, it's not about being different. It's about being superior.
You're right.
Right? So it's all well. Differentiation is a positive thing. All right. I am different to you because my lived experience is very different. I wasn't born in Israel. But I've been there, and I have lots of Israeli friends, and I understand there's a different dynamic, and it's very interesting, and I want to understand more about it. Okay, but I don't think to myself, oh, I'm superior to that person over there, because and that's the thing that we as an industry need to wake up about. Okay, we are not superior to our customers, and we are not superior to our consumers. Okay, and way too often I hear tech bros, tech founders in particular, they don't give a shit about the end user. Sorry to use that expression.
I mean, please do.
It's not. They don't. The customer is a pain in the ass. And that is really bad news for society.
Great.
Why do you think that the person who's paying for this, because they are in the end, it's their money that buys the products, that goes into the engine, that pays for the marketing spend, and so why is it that they're not important? And I think that this disconnect between us, and it's gotten worse, I think, unfortunately, needs to be addressed. So I'm a member of something called the Internet Commission, and you may be aware that there has been a whole load of legislation that's come through that is all about online harms and protecting the consumer from the evils, because there are lots of evils, right, that are going on the internet and on social media platforms and what have you. And that legislation, that regulation is enforceable, and it is very tough. And I think we will see that the regulators have to intervene, right, to ensure that we are behaving in an appropriately responsible way with our end users in mind. Because if we do not, then I fear we're just going to become like this dark underbelly of politics and disgust, if you like, for feeling that that we're somehow better off than everybody else, because we will be.
I mean, I think that we are the consumer. So one of the things I really appreciate in every company I join is a strong ethos. It's also why I left. I wanted to work for a nonprofit, something I believe in. But I also joined Number 8 in the first place because they had a strong ethos around privacy and around like protecting the end user and building around it, and not fighting against it, but rather embracing it in something as part of the ethos and what we're trying to achieve. So it's also making a choice as if you're joining any company, if you're building any company, if anything, like what is your ethos? What do you stand for? And I think that's something that we all have to choose and hopefully make a better future. I
think we're going to find it a lot harder going forward.
I agree.
Right?
But I've always been a social democrat, right? I believe in entrepreneurialism. I believe in conscious capitalism. I believe in positive energy for all, and that we should share a little bit more of it around. Okay. But the reality of the situation is it's way too much power concentrated in the hands of too few organizations and individuals. And in these circumstances, that's dangerous, because that's how fascism rose. That is how, the politics of hate and envy emerge. And we only have to look across the pond to our cousins in the United States to see what can happen and what is happening in those countries. It is very, very important that we maintain our identity without question. All right. And we should defend our borders without question. But we also have to understand that we are the diversity of our communities and the diversity of our countries and our societies is a positive thing, not a negative thing. And that is something that, unfortunately, I don't hear enough about anymore. We have our little we have our fan moments where we're all into conscious, sustainability. Yes, we're all into diversity, equality and inclusion. Yes, we're very much pro women. We're pro trans. We're pro, with pride, the month of pride, etc., etc. Then we've ticked the boxes. We've made a template. We've sent it around the office. HR are onto it. We're back to normal. Okay. I mean, I just did a documentary and included a drag queen, and they're talking about the trans right being threatened and how scary it is to be a trans women or men right now. So I guess it's also the choice, like it's how we choose. If we choose to live in our bubble, if we choose to turn a blind eye to what's happening, or if we don't hold ourselves accountable and we just say, oh, this is the way it is, then yes, the world will become a darker place.
It will. And
I mean, I come from a place when, I don't know, it's a dark place.
Yeah, we have to shed light, you know,
Yeah.
and it is our personal, you know, I think all of us have a responsibility to one another within this community, okay, to point out when things aren't right and to embrace those and lift them up, the people who are doing and speaking to their truth, right, and doing the right thing by each other. It's so fundamental to society. And AI is a tool, a very powerful tool, but it's a tool. Don't let it become anything more than that. Please.
I don't think so I don't believe in, oh, AI will replace my job. I believe that people that's using AI will replace people's job. And the only thing I told my team is that I forced my team to use AI every day in some way or another, because I want them to have a job in the future. And I
100%.
And it's part of our tech. So we were always an AI company. So, but I see it as a tool. It's not designed like anything else, like a computer. It's a tool.
100%.
And we need to accept it as such. And to sum up, one tip, what do you think would have been the one tip you wish that you knew earlier in your career?
Believe in yourself. That's my number one tip.
I love it.
Because without self-belief, you're a pawn. You have no self-determination. So believe. And if you don't believe, then get some coaching or go and get some mentoring and work with people to improve your self-confidence. Because the number one thing you have to have in life is self-belief.
That's a wonderful takeaway. Thank you so much, Mary. It's been such a pleasure. Absolutely fascinating. And thank you all so much for listening. For this episode and many more, go to www.womenliftingwomen.il. And until next time, I'll see you soon.